Like, the historic signs that kind of show like directionally where things are.
Yeah.
Landmarks. And I saw Brandywine something.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like my brain was triggered, and I was like, no way does Stephen have a sign on the historic.
Welcome to Process Makes Purpose, the podcast that explores innovative branding, digital marketing, and entrepreneurship. Our goal is to help you unlock your brand's full potential in today's digital landscape. Tune in to gain actionable knowledge and proven tactics to elevate your business.
All right, so we're here for another episode of Process Makes Purpose. We got our friend here, Stephen Rosenthal. And I think it'd just be good to start out with just introducing yourself, what you do, your background, and
Definitely.
Get started on this conversation.
Definitely. Yeah, it's funny to be welcomed to my office. But
Yeah, thanks for having us.
We are, it's ironic, but it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for making the trip. Yeah, so I'm Stephen Rosenthal. Currently, primary day job is the CEO of DocLib, client of Mozaic, longtime client of Mozaic before the media division.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes.
Pre-Kyle.
Yeah, with BK and AK.
Yeah.
Kyle and after, before Kyle after.
Yeah, right.
What are we, 2 AK here?
Yeah.
So that's about like what I'm doing now. I started, how far should we go back here? I started
At the beginning.
I think so. Yeah, I think we should give context to your involvement, right? Mosaic, we started doing the design, branding type of work, and I personally have known Stephen for a handful of years now.
Mm-hmm.
Went to the same high school as my wife and business partner Sienna, and have grown to be great friends.
Yeah.
But also the business that you started, I don't know, pre-Kyle.
Yeah.
When did you start?
2PK.
2PK. 2PK.
It was 2020. It was actually January 26th. The reason I know that is because is when the business started that we're about to talk about. But the reason I know that is the next full week was COVID lockdown. And the payroll protection plan, remember those stipends the government was giving out? You had to have incorporated your business before January 27th.
Oh my God.
And I was incorporated January 26th. So it's like payroll protection plan.
I love that security.
Yeah. It's funny. Anyway.
That is funny. So you started Aurra Media, which through time has ebbed and flowed. You grew it to a certain size, and we're looking for somebody to take over as CEO or perhaps take over ownership. We had talked about it for a handful of months before making the decision. I wasn't making the decision without Kyle, so looped in Kyle. And now Aurra Media becomes a part of Mosaic Collective.
Yes.
And Stephen,
Cheers
cheers to that. We're here today in the original Aurra Media studio.
Yes, that's right.
It's amazing.
Yeah. That's right.
Full
circle.
These were the mics that I bought to test out, hey, should we do podcasting?
Yeah.
Amazing. That's so cool. And we're here talking about it. That's amazing. So I forget where we were going with that, but that's the context.
That's my background. Yeah. How did you guys meet?
Good question.
I worked with Sienna when she was doing Mosaic design for
That's
probably about a year and a half.
How'd you get connected with Sienna?
Skylar. So Skylar worked with me at 1615, a different company that I worked at previously. And then he told me that Sienna had some freelancing opportunities. And I was like, yeah, sure. Sounds great. I'll start to jump on that. So
awesome.
Yeah, I worked with them for about a year and a half. And then Dee told me when you guys started to be in talks, he just kind of floated out there like, not saying anything's happening here, but if something were to happen.
What do you think?
Yeah. So yeah, we hit it off really well and kind of became a no-brainer to jump on board.
Yeah, I remember Dee being like, I've got this really solid godly dude that I think is going to be great, you know? And here we are, AK.
Here we are.
AK. Yep. Almost 1 AK now.
That's awesome. That's fun.
Well,
yes,
yeah.
that's my background.
Yeah. So I mean, there's probably plenty of different things we could talk about. But I think, and I'm sure this is just one of many times we will have you on the podcast. But
nice. Secured a repeat visit.
Well, hopefully.
We'll see how that goes.
All right, we'll see. Still on the hot seat.
Yeah. But yeah, so we saw on LinkedIn that you had posted that you went to a SaaS event, and that software as a service. You went to a seminar, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like a seminar there.
Yeah.
And one of the takeaways you posted on LinkedIn was really interesting to us. So just to read what you said, it was, my number one takeaway from the event was from the CEO at Deal Machine. He introduced the bear and bike method of content marketing, which intriguing. What does that mean? There is not anything particularly special.
You liked my hook, huh?
Yeah, that was
good.
a great hook.
Cool.
Great hook. Great. Yep. No notes from the copywriting. There's
I
not
went rogue on that one.
Good job.
There's not anything particularly special or unique about a single bear. There is not anything particularly special or unique about a single bike. However, a bear that can ride a bike is incredibly special. When thinking about marketing for yourself or your business, think about how you can be a bear on a bike instead of just a bear or just a bike. So
I was debating.
Yeah.
I edited that last sentence a few times because it sounded too wordy. Still does.
Yeah.
But that's all right.
concept remains the same.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, we just thought that was a really interesting concept, and we even like privately had a conversation like, man, like we really like that analogy, and so we thought that would be something for us just to have a conversation about, see what insights you gathered from it, just even outside of just that short little blurb. But I guess, was that in a breakout session or was that?
Yeah. So they the organization. I'll just give like a quick 2-3 minute background. The organization is called SaaS Academy, and it's a like tailor-made community with events and like training material and coaching. It's kind of like their 3 areas that they do, but it's tailor-made for founders and CEOs of software companies. And it's supposed to be like the one-stop shop to learn everything from like starting your software company up through being at like a 10 million annual recurring revenue business and beyond. They have like a separate program for like the really big fish that this guy, the CEO of Deal Machine, was in. So they kind of bring that group in to speak to, us smaller fish. So, but, where was I going with that? Oh, so that was SaaS Academy. And basically they have like specific, like themes for each of their intensives, they call them. So they have two intensives a year. This intensive was a marketing theme. So it was like everything you need to know about marketing for a software company.
Gotcha.
And this guy, they had like a group of 3 founders who are either still running their software businesses or had exited their software business that came and spoke about how they had implemented marketing to grow their business, and specifically content marketing. So this guy, David Letko, who's a CEO at Deal Machine, so his particular market was really around real estate investors and specifically wholesalers. So very active on Instagram. So that like his content marketing strategy was exclusively Instagram. And he was describing how in order to stand out in his marketing, he wanted to layer on two unique things on top of each other. There's a lot of for him specifically, there's a lot of people on Instagram that talk about real estate. There's a lot of people on Instagram that talk about cars or racing cars, but he has a passion for both, built his real estate business and a software product, Deal Machine, that he wants to market. And he also races Ferraris. That's like his hobby. And he drives a Ferrari, he's like a kind of like a larger than life personality. So he layered on in his content marketing, he talks about freeing up your time in real estate in order to pursue a passion, and for him that is racing Ferraris. So so he layers those 2 things on, and it's like, wow, it's like this is a bear riding a bike. This is pretty cool. So he was talking about like the whole strategy and the exercise that he had the room do it's pretty cool. There's probably like 300, 400 software CEOs and founders in the room.
Wow.
Is to think about how your content marketing can have that same approach, you know, from bear and a bike. But I was thinking about it also, like, how about your whole business? You know what I mean? Like,
that's a good point.
And like, how can you think about being unique and not just drawing attention, but like potentially even serving in a very unique way your customers, you know, with that strategy. So that's kind of where I extrapolated it out to. I don't think that's where David was going with it, but
no,
you know,
I think that applies really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the idea,
Yeah.
at least, you know.
Yeah, it's a unique way. I mean, even just the way that he made that analogy, you can go so many different ways to try and make that same analogy, but even just making it about a bear riding a bike is an analogy that sticks with you in and of itself.
Yeah.
That analogy in of itself is a bear on a bike. You know what I mean?
Right. It sticks in your mind. It does. Yeah.
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 So, I mean, you kind of brought up that you thought about it even not just from marketing, but as part of a business. So, like, were there practical applications that you were able to use as like a takeaway, or things that maybe sparked a thought in your mind for your business?
Yeah. Well, so there is. I think there's a couple directions we could go with this. One that I think is prevalent for Mosaic and for what was Aurra Media is we, for whatever reason, in 2020 and 2021 at Aurra Media, hit it big with the mining companies, you know? So we were like doing a lot of content marketing for publicly traded mining companies. We had 3 clients at that time, and of our 5, you know? So kind of interesting doing organic LinkedIn and podcast content for mining companies. But that's like super bear in the bike, right? Like, can you think of a podcast that is about a publicly traded mining company? Like, if you're just listening to this for the first time, unless you've come across now Mosaic Media's marketing for clients, you probably haven't. You know what I mean?
Right.
There might be only 3 ever in existence. You know? So that was like, I thought about that, and as it pertains to DocLib, you know, the software company that I'm running now, that it's a similar thing. And I think about it as like your product and your market, you know, is kind of like is one way to think about this. So like for DocLib specifically, we have, you know, a financial automation tool for a very specific group of manufacturing companies, not even like all manufacturers, although we're expanding that market now into all manufacturers. That is expanded, but previously and historically, it's been for a very small list of like 2,500 manufacturing companies globally. Okay. So for us, it's like how can we be the absolute best for a very specific market? Another way to think about it for your business would be somebody like for some of my real estate investing, I use a specific lawyer for that investment. And you can think about, like, there's a lot of lawyers in the world, right? There's a lot of people that have real estate expertise, but layering on those 2 things together, it's like you can become the best in the world at something specific when you layer 2 things together. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's very, very hard to be the best in the world at lawyering.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what the verb of being a lawyer is.
Right.
But
Practicing law.
Yes, there you go. I like lawyering.
I was going to say lawyering is so much better.
Yeah, it's not loitering, lawyering. And it's like very hard to be the best in the world at real estate, or like maybe buying single family real estate housing. But it would be a lot easier theoretically to be best in the world at being a lawyer for single family, you know what I mean? As opposed to one of those specific things. So that's kind of how I thought about it for businesses. And I think it's, you know, you can think about it like as a part of your offering, or you could think about it as like, I'm going to be very specific at the niche that I'm going to serve, the clients that I'm going to serve. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So kind of like that. I mean, another way to say that would just be finding a unique niche as well, would be like a practical application. If we're using terminology people are used to, like finding a unique niche and then positioning yourself among and your audience as unique. Like you were saying, even the real estate with the Ferrari, like interesting combination, like not really like someone who races Ferraris, but also does real estate. That's just an interesting person. Yeah. But that's a very unique niche of people that love real estate and supercars. Like that's versus just like, I'm just a real estate person, or I like that idea of marrying the two, and then becoming kind of its own thing. And I think even outside of like business application for personal brands, that's huge. Like I think a lot of people are afraid to show like the different aspects of their life, and they just try to say like, I'm this person, which ends up putting you in a box that makes you less interesting, versus it's like, wait, you like supercars, you like real estate, and then you also really like trains for some, like what is this trains thing? Like this is weird, you know, like you add like another component, like you just keep revealing different layers of you that makes you that bear on the bike at the end of the day, because you're like, this person's just, there's so much depth to that individual from a personal branding perspective. But I would say even like you can do that with businesses too. You just have to be a little bit more creative, I think, in how to do that, because I think as people, it's very easy to show how unique you are if you're willing to put it all out there.
Right. Yeah. And that takes there's a level of uncomfortability with that for sure. Right. Especially if you're not good at one of those things, you know. It's like you're racing Ferraris, dude. You're not like going over 60. But I think about like Sienna and her website design business, you know, when the early start of Mozaic and like the niche that she had with speakers and still does, you know, and how you guys serve and now have a whole plethora of service offerings for speakers, you know, and doing deals with, you know, that National Association, you know, very cool to think about how that's a bear in the bike, you know. She's phenomenal at website design, but very hard to be best in the world at website design. But applying that to a niche of speakers and how to bring phenomenal website design to that niche that's bear in the bike. You know?
That's the bear in the bike.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that idea of just like within business. I think that's just so huge and we've even come across companies, because that's like a big part of what we do is when we start to talk with somebody is like, what's the thing that sets you apart from everybody else, right? Like, so you're a financial advisor, but like there's a lot of financial advisors. Why should someone pick you over someone else? And like you said, it may be hard to be the best financial advisor in the world, but maybe you serve a specific niche client, or one of the services that you provide is incredibly niche as well. So that's something that we think about. But I like that we now can like have a phrase to go with like, what's your bear in the bike? You know, like, you know, we'll have to keep giving shout outs. You know, but
cool. Nice. Yeah. I think even what's interesting is like, you know, a lot of people might think about how like, well, I don't want to niche down because it's going to limit the client that I can serve, or it's going to like pigeonhole me into one area. That's why I think, you know, it's helpful, specifically like going back to the Deal Machine example. He was having a hard time cutting through the noise of a competition. So he started to get some early traction. He was the only shop in town for his product, then started to get some real knockoff competition coming into the market. He's like, how do I cut through this noise? So he didn't necessarily change the product or his market, but he changed how he was marketing his product, which is really where I think like with Mozaic and where I could see you guys, you know, executing really well for clients on that is like, you know, you get to know the client. It's like what elements of their business can we incorporate into their marketing that just makes them not just any old financial, you know, institution or financial planner. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Narrowing in on the person too, the figurehead of the business, and that's what we try to do for clients that we have currently, right? Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a big reason that we really like what you built with Aurra, with the podcast strategy, because even if, let's say, someone doesn't have a specific answer, like what's your unique thing as a financial advisor in such and such area, now their unique thing can be, I have a podcast as a financial advisor in this area, and like the people that you start to talk to can start to bring that uniqueness to your own brand, you know what I mean? So you can start to establish yourself as a unique brand online because you have your own opinions on there. They start to learn a little bit more about you as an individual. They get a taste of what it's going to be like to work with you, which again, I think the easiest thing to be a bear in the bike about is your individuality.
Right.
So like the podcast being something that promotes thought leadership, that's a super easy way for a company to differentiate itself if it doesn't have a specific answer to that right away.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's like the whole founder-led marketing is like a buzzy term that I hear on LinkedIn a lot, but I think you're hitting on the nail on the head there, where it's especially on a podcast like this, it's supposed to feel like you're basically sitting in a living room with us as a listener, hearing us have a conversation. Especially if you're hosting that podcast and stewarding that conversation over many episodes, it's like you're naturally going to get to know that person and who they are, what they're interested in, how they talk, what they care about. And as a marketing agency, teasing those things out, highlighting those in your marketing, that's the benefit of a founder who doesn't know how to approach content marketing. Not to make this a Mosaic Media plug, but to make it a Mosaic Media plug. Like if you're listening to this having a hard time, like how am I going to figure out in my own life what I can incorporate into my business marketing? It's like, call Dee and Kyle. They'll get you on the podcast, they'll go through the implementation. And then as you start to find your voice on that podcast and start to show the parts of your personality and who you are that you're comfortable showing, then you package good marketing around that, and there you go. You're off to the races. Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as that piece of it is concerned, like that niching down, that finding your unique attributes. Do you think there's any other ways outside? Like, for example, right now we're talking about content marketing, right? So like, podcasting is one way you can do that. Do you think do you think it's strong enough that even if your business doesn't necessarily have a bear in the bike, like I'm a financial advisor from Wilmington, and that's my niche, like that's what I say my niche is. Maybe you serve a certain segment of small to medium sized businesses. That's as niche as you go. Do you think content marketing in and of itself is a strong enough bear in the bike moment for your company to differentiate yourself, like founder led type of?
Yeah, I think it. The thing about marketing, as you guys know, and you could probably educate me a little bit further on, but it's about grabbing attention of the right people. So I think there's a balance there, because depending on, you don't want things that you're interested in to end up ostracizing your audience. Like, so for instance, if I had an audience that was very into environmental preservation, or like not wanting to see hunting get proliferated, and then all my marketing was like layering on my hobby of hunting. It's like it's not effective in my marketing. So I think there's definitely some nuance. There's some things that you need to navigate. I'll say, on what you highlight. But
I think a bear on the bike would definitely be the CEO of Beyond Meat being a hunter. That'd be a bear on the bike. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, might ostracize some clients, but yeah. So your question was, are there things outside of content marketing for a business, or?
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like one thing that you can bring to the table well is like even feel like a lot of the businesses that you start and that you operate are fairly niche. Like you found different ways to find your bear. Like even DocLib, for an example, like you guys do AP processing or AP automation for specific niche manufacturing companies. It's not just anybody and everybody, right. Which I know you said you're starting to expand, but you didn't start that way. You didn't start with everybody. You started with a niche. But like, I'm curious when you think through business ideas, as I'm sure you do often with just the way that your mind works, like how do you start to try and find what the differentiating factors are when you're thinking through a business?
I am a huge proponent of allow the market to decide. I think it was in Mark Andreessen or Ben Horowitz that had this one-liner, but like, if you find the right market, they'll pull product out of your hands. Okay. So I feel like a lot of that comes back to focusing on the people and focusing on like what people care about and what they're experiencing in their day to day and how you can properly serve those people, whether that's through products or services. So I would say that call your customers or your people that you want to be your customers and listen to what they have to say, which is also the benefit of having a podcast, because you could, if you're like, oh, they're not going to answer me, you invite, if they're a prospect, people like to be invited on a podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's like a helpful way, I think, to have a long form conversation outside of just the context of your business as well. And with the products that you offer, you can have a long form conversation with your customer about things they care about, what they're thinking about, what their day-to-day looks like. And eventually, if you have that conversation enough, it will become apparent the patterns in those people. Right. And then you build products and services to serve that, and then those will get sold, Be like, hey, remember when you told me that you're really struggling with this? Well, this could help you, and we have a relationship because we've been talking for 3 months. It's like, do you want to try it out? You know what I mean? It's like, it's pretty no brainer. They're probably going to say yes. At least one of them will, So that's how I would say. But that's more, I think that's bigger picture, probably a little bit more like business ideation and product ideation. So yeah, I guess that answers your question though, because that was your question. Like how do I think about that? Yeah.
So how do you go from DocLib, SaaS company, owner operator, to Brandywine Bounce House?
Let's go, baby.
What's the
we're sitting in the world corporate headquarters of Brandywine Bounce Masters. Type them into Google, find our studio. But
it was so funny. We were pulling in off 95 into Wilmington, and there were like the historic signs that kind of show like directionally where things are. Landmarks. And I saw Brandywine something. And I was like, oh, like my brain was triggered, and I was like, no way does Stephen have a sign on the historic.
That'd be some guerrilla marketing.
I was like, he owns Wilmington. Holy smokes. Anyway, so I guess
how did I go to that?
So it's the same thought process, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, so that was funny. The customer in this case, my first customer was my 3-year-old. So we were prepping for his first birthday, and like any good parents of 1-year-olds, we were a week out prepping for his first birthday. It's like, oh shoot, we got to do something. So nobody was available to rent a bounce house from. So I went on Amazon and just, bought like one of the residential ones that are just small. I was like, man, this was so fun. Like everybody loved it. I was like, I wonder if I could rent these out. I think like people do that. And I started researching it. I was like, I don't have time for this. But I like D, taking a page out of D's playbook, build a business plan, put it aside.
You never know when somebody comes into your life and it's like, oh, wait, this could work for you.
Well, then that Christmas, my brother-in-law comes up to me and he's like, hey, this guy is thinking about selling a bounce house business to me. I was like, he's like, I don't have any experience in that or in like business buying or anything. Do you think you could help me out? I'm like, boy, do I got the document for you, man. So that night, cleaned it up, sent it over to him. And then he's like, do you just want to like do this with me? Like, do you want to like help me buy this business and potentially be in it with me? Well, this guy had 350 units and a huge warehouse, the forklift and 5 trucks, like really fully built out business. That deal didn't end up working out for a variety of reasons. Probably a story for another day. But we were like bought into the idea. We're like, our minds were made up that we're going to be operating a bounce house business. So like, screw it, let's just buy a bunch, and just go for it. So we bought a dunk tank. And now we've got a dunk tank. We got a 25-foot water slide, 19-footer, 18-footer.
Oh man.
We got a combo. We got 3 or 4 other like big 13 by 13 bounce houses. So spun up a website. There's a niche software company called Inflatable Office that is like the back-end ERP for bounce house businesses.
There you go.
So I would actually love to buy them one day. I forgot to tell you about this. I really want to pursue them.
Interesting.
So, send you heard it here first. Let's go see. That's the buy mandate.
Hello.
But yeah, so then we started building the business out. We grew this year 347%. So it was
all right.
high demand
that's awesome.
for bounce houses. So yeah, it's been fun.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's
it's a good
so
time.
fun.
We're in year 2 now of that business.
How much more different is that from running a SaaS company? I mean, I feel like that's a completely different mindset, isn't it? Like splitting between software as a service, but then more of a direct to consumer service?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say tactically, definitely. But as we were talking about, just today, talking about Mosaic and the corollaries between DocLib, and there's corollaries between the Bounce House business as well. I feel like there are foundational principles. I mean, Ray Dalio wrote a whole book called Principles on these foundational principles that like you build businesses on. And I feel like there are it's definitely a more capital intensive business than any of the other services or software businesses that I've run. Like I just haven't really paid too much attention to the balance sheet because it feels like just looking at your bank account, like you can see your balance sheet, for a lot of these businesses. But like for the Bounce Master business, it's like depreciating assets, what's the most tax efficient vehicles to, keep inventory, all that kind of stuff. So that's probably the biggest difference, but the foundational principles are the same. And I think that's why, the business is growing at the rate that it is. Granted, it's small, so like percentage growth is huge when you're that small, but it is, I think, those foundational things that guide tactical decisions that just make it easier. You know what I mean? Like we're going to put people above all else, and like, we want to operate the business sustainably. So like we have to make tough decisions, but we want to put people first. And then we want to build something that we're proud of, that's filled with integrity, good decisions. We want to like see where the market leads and push as hard as we can within a bootstrapped constraint, build sustainably. So those principles really eliminate a lot of ways that you would operate. You know what I mean? Yeah. So decisions just become clear,
It's true. With the clientele being different though.
Yeah.
It does throw sort of a monkey wrench into the situation, right?
You know what's funny though? I bet DocLib users buy a lot of inflatable bounce houses because they're like the stereotypical AP clerk is like, if you envision an AP clerk, it's a woman in her 40s, is like pretty the stereotype. There's obviously a lot of people in AP, but that's like this stereotypical person renting our bounce houses as well. There's just a little bit of a different buying cycle, it's a lot less funny. Zeros, but yeah, I think, we've, the direct to consumer is different. I mean, you experienced this with Beyond Bar,
exactly.
So I'm sure and you're a little further along, I think, than we are in that. So switching, I'll turn it back around to you, like direct to consumer business. Yeah. How has that been?
I only brought it up because when you're talking B2B and you're selling services to other business owners who think about business in the same ways that you do. Yeah. Like you're just thinking through all of the complex situations, prioritizing, whatever is on your plate, mainly, hopefully, people and the people that work for you. Yeah. And so like there's a level of respect there. Yeah. When you're selling services to them, when you're selling to consumers, it's a totally, and in my experience, particularly with Beyond Bar, it's a totally different dynamic because consumers buy things differently. They receive it differently. They don't understand what it took to deliver the service or the product that is behind the payment wall that they put their credit card through. Yes, that's very true. I think the challenges that you run into with your consumers change. Yeah. And then you find yourself like, it's almost like, I don't know, maybe it's a societal thing because of the way that people have been burned, from corporations or, whatever with their purchasing decisions. But we've had a couple of instances where people ask for refund, or we've had people like pause their memberships for whatever reasons. And in one particular instance, I don't think she'll ever listen to this, so I'll just share it.
Nice.
Maybe we'll cut it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
maybe the AI will cut it. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, terms and right. So this is like terms and conditions for the membership.
Yeah.
Very clear.
Yeah.
Super not corporate. Very like we wrote them ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very clearly states that if you
But don't sue because it's probably been looked at by a lawyer.
Yes, it has been. Everything's looked at by a lawyer, but we write them ourselves.
Stands up in court.
Anyway.
Boy, are we digressing.
Yeah, geez.
Just making a quick little audio.
That's
audio
okay.
Who invited this guy?
Yeah. It's related in some way. I'm weaving.
Yes.
I'm weaving. Yeah. We'll weave it back in. We'll weave it back in.
You got the weave going.
Man, it's going. It's going. So, terms and conditions, very clearly, you want to cancel your membership, you cancel it. Just like yourself, right? Like go on your account, hit cancel.
Yeah.
Just like you'd cancel your Netflix subscription, just like you'd cancel your Amazon subscription. We have a client that wants to cancel, that emailed us about canceling her subscription. We were like, oh no, sorry to see you go.
Yeah.
A couple months go by, she gets charged a couple different times and says, and comes back to us and says, hey, why am I still being charged? I canceled my subscription. We were like, you didn't. It's still active. She was like, oh, but I emailed you. And we're like, well, okay, I understand, like, little bit of a miscommunication. We can refund you for this month that just got charged because it just happened. But the previous month, it's like, we're a business. We're trying to manage cash flow. Everything, the books are closed. Like what comes in goes out to pay instructors, whatever. It's a big deal. It was the end of the world for this woman. And when you're dealing with other businesses, those are conversations where it's like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, you know what? I should have checked my credit card statement.
That is very true.
Like, whatever. I got you. It's fine. We'll move on. But instead, now you're dealing with an individual who's now putting in a claim to their credit card company to dispute the charge for $130. It's like, here's your $130 back, please. So it's like a different, it's a totally different, because they don't necessarily understand like what goes in behind the scenes to make everything as clean as it is. What she doesn't understand is that we have those terms and conditions for a reason. And and the reason we have to manage cash flow the way we do is to make sure that the studio stays around for everybody else to enjoy. If we don't abide by the policies that we put in place, the principles that we set to run our business, then it doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So that's the biggest difference, I think. And that's what I was curious to hear from you, if there's anything like that on the bouncy house side of things.
I think there's definitely been situations like that. I think I, for better or worse, take the approach of sort of laughing it off. It's just like, it's just not a huge deal to me. And I like, it's more of like a humorous story for us to tell, like sipping coffee together, But
it was traumatic for the customer, I guess. And that's I don't know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's definitely. So I think this is like harkens back to the sales background, which is why I think it's so helpful if you're going to like make a career in leadership and business to have just cut your teeth at one point in sales, even if it wasn't like part of your career or like a long-term thing, even just like cold call your freelancing services and just like hear how people respond when you call them. So like, for instance, going back to Deal Machine, I used Deal Machine to send out direct mailers to all the houses in this area to see if I could pick up like a cheap real estate deal, because that's what Deal Machine does. I get a phone call and I'm so tempted just to play the recording, but this guy, oh my gosh, you would have thought that I like shot his dog, ran his house over with a bulldozer, man. Like insane. Calls me up and is like, he said, if you call me again, I'm coming down to your office. He's like, you're going to wish your house was for sale. I'm like, I'm going to wish my house was for sale. But it's like, nothing happened. I was like, I mean, don't come to the office.
Bad idea.
You come, like, there's going to be an issue here, you know, but you'll be scared. Yeah. But for that, I was just like, in awe. And I mean, people like that they're not mad at me. Like, I mean, there's something else going on with this guy and he's upset about it, you know? And it was like, oh, I can take some of this anger out right now, you know, consciously or subconsciously, that's what he's doing. So there's like that element where it's like, yeah, I feel for the guy that he's in a mental headspace that he gets one postcard in the mail and is ready to murder somebody.
You never know.
You know what I mean?
That guy could have gotten a robocall from India a year ago and lost all the money in his bank account. Like, you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So there's like that level of compassion for the guy, but then it's also like I send the recording over to a few friends and we have a good laugh.
Yeah,
you know, you know what I mean.
I totally
and then we move on. You know? And hope that the guy doesn't show up. But
exactly.
But that's for the bounce house business. There's been a few like that, but I'm always of the mindset that like people, I like enjoy. There's been times I worked for a business in the past where I was a salesperson and their delivery was terrible, absolutely terrible. So every conversation I had was like talking myself out of a corner, you know, like they're like, there's someone in front of me that I can express this 5 years of hatred that I have for this company towards, you know what I mean? So it's like I'm constantly back, like trying to get around this, you know, there's still a quota to beat, you know, like, so I think but what I found in that experience specifically was people are amazed when they're like all fired up and you're like, yeah, I get that. They're like, what? Like, you can't get mad at that anymore. Like, yeah, you do get it.
Yeah. That's true. You know? Some people will.
Yeah, sure. But like by and large, most people are like kind of taken aback. So I try to like pattern interrupt, I think is like the step one is like, which is another marketing, you know, strategy. So it's like they're on this track, getting super frustrated, interrupt their pattern with like compassion and kindness. And they're kind of taken aback. And then it's like, okay, he's actually not, you know, worth burning at the stake. Maybe we can find like a compromised ground. You know what I mean? Yeah,
totally.
So that's kind of how I've tried to approach that. It works. It works in a lot of cases. In some cases, it's just like you got to just laugh it off and move on.
Yeah.
You know.
Agreed.
But
yeah. I mean, I feel like you brought up pattern interrupt, and to weave the conversation. There is a piece to it though that's an argument to be made about the bear and the bike with marketing is a lot of times, like even when I'm on social media.
I was hoping you'd pick up on this idea that I was trying to seed.
It's scrolling, right? But then there's sometimes I just watch like a full, it's an advertisement, but I'll watch the full thing because it doesn't feel like an advertisement, or they hooked me with such a way that was just outside of what a typical ad would be, like, come buy our burger. Like, I'm not stopping for that. But then like, a lot of what you're seeing now is people doing a little bit more of a guerrilla marketing approach with social, where they're almost embracing meme culture because that's so big, especially on like the meta platforms, where they've embraced memes and then they just like stitch in their advertisement into the meme, which is so much more memorable and makes you actually feel something for the brand rather than just like, oh, it's just another burger shop, you know, like, okay, whatever.
Right.
So,
well, and that was the hypothesis behind the podcast, like leading with podcast marketing in B2B, because in B2B, like David Ogilvy has this famous quote talking about how people don't buy from corporations, they buy from people. And like a podcast, like you're not talking to DocLib, right? You're talking to Stephen. I represent DocLib and you guys represent Mozaic. So like when someone goes to do business now with Mosaic, they have Kyle and D in their minds, as opposed to just a brand, you know? So that's like one of the reasons, and it pattern interrupts because you've got like promotion from a company. Like we've promoted Mosaic pretty heavily on this podcast, but it doesn't felt like that. Like we're talking about real life circumstances. We're talking about real life business building. And in the context, it kind of all makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I could see why someone, even if it's not me, would need help figuring out their voice and how to properly layer that onto their business messaging, you know, and how Mosaic could do that. So I feel like that's like, again, you know, the going back full circle to like you were talking about podcasting being the bear and the bike. It's also the pattern interrupt because, you know, it's just not another brand advertisement. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think as soon as people see anything that smells like a brand, like anything that feels branded in a capacity, unless it's highly well done or the copy is compelling enough, people are just going right past it at this point in time. And I think that's where, as marketers, we have to think about how do we make our clients stand out among that noise. And that's just the constant game, is like how to stay ahead of the trends of what people are doing. And like, because at the end of the day, like the reason that we're marketing these products is we believe that it will help the end consumer. So like if the end consumer just ignores what we're trying to show them, then they're not going to be able to be helped by that product. So that's where the goal of marketing, as we're trying to get content in front of people, is like, how do we keep it fresh and interesting so that people can understand that this is a product out there to help them with the problem they may be having. And so like, whether it's podcasting, whether it's, you know, finding, for some people, maybe it's guerrilla marketing through meme culture, whatever, like whatever's appropriate for your brand, I think is probably the answer to that. But whatever it is, I would say just not like the standard play that you see every single other business do. Otherwise you'll be in the same place in 6 months with your followings, with your metrics, likes, all of that. It's not going to change. It's not going to move the needle in 6 months if you just do the same thing everybody else does.
Yeah. Well, and this is, hearing you talk about this reminds me of, I've been listening to this podcast called Acquired. I don't know if you guys have heard of that.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's really good. They do like long form deep research, just two guys who do like long form deep research into brands that we all know and love. The one of the ones was IKEA. It's just like the history of this brand is unreal. You would love it, D.
I bet.
I'm sure it'd be one of your favorite podcasts.
IKEA is a really interesting company too.
Oh, crazy. And the amount of cash that they are sitting on is insane.
I believe it. I mean, they have tons of real estate. I mean, they're really interesting. Have you ever been to IKEA?
Yeah.
The
King of Prussia was the first one in the U.S.
Oh, was it?
Really?
Yeah, that was their first foray into the U.S.
I think that was the one I went to recently. They have like a food court.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was like,
where
am
like
I?
the Swedish meatballs.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they the Swedish meatballs, like the history behind that is insane.
I bet.
It's insane. I mean, there's, you got to listen to their podcast, but like the pattern interrupt that made me think of this, as well as like the sniffing a brand. They did a episode on Porsche. They did another one on Hermes, like the luxury brand. But like those companies, like Porsche, when they were up and coming, had phenomenal marketing. Like and their ads were amazing. Like they would have it was infamous, just like a one-liner with a picture of the Porsche. And one of them was like a picture of like, I think it was either the 911 or it might have been the 924, but it said kills bugs fast. It's just like,
great.
Like this, like edgy, like a luxury brand would never dare touch that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like they just owned it, and it was just like sticks in your mind. You know what I mean? But then over time, they've like built this legacy. Like Porsche is just like this insane legacy. Even the fact that we correlate them like with Ferrari, or you're a Porsche or Ferrari guy, and then like the Porsche Cayenne like competes with the Honda CR-V. It's like Ferrari like would not even think of that. Porsche makes 340,000 cars a year. Ferrari makes 13,000 cars a year. Wow. You know, and like the average price of a Porsche, I think or like the purchase price of any car in their lineup is $100,000. Average price of Ferrari is $330,000. So like the fact that you're comparing those two brands, like it's like comparing like Wendy's and Fogo de Chao. You know what I mean? It's just like totally different business models, but the same. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
But all that to say, like over time, I think that you build a brand even within a specific niche. Obviously, it might not be a global brand like Porsche, but you've built a brand in a niche that now you can almost, it has a personality in and of itself, and you have the capabilities to be a little bit more brand heavy because that has some weight to it. You know what I mean? Which is part of, man, this is going to be really sound like a sales pitch, but that's like part of the triple threat, right? Of Mosaic, where it's like you've got this.
We paid you to say all
I know, right? It's like I'm a shareholder or something, but it's like the branding, like you can't just go by, like, let brand be for another day. You know, you've got to have a brand strategy involved in like your pattern interrupt daily run of the mill marketing. You know, there's got to be both sides to that coin. So talk to Kyle and D about that, I guess. You know?
Yeah, I think another one, I guess my last example is even the most recent one that came up was Jaguar and like their full rebrand. And I mean, huge pattern interrupt for one thing. Yeah. Obviously, like
you got people talking about it.
Whether it's a good or bad thing, people are talking about them for the first time in how long.
Yeah.
And you know, we'll see in the next few quarters if it was a good decision or not what they did. But they definitely pattern interrupt a lot of people on that one.
Yeah, you got to clip that from your podcast and put that on LinkedIn. You'll get some good likes on that, or some fiery comments.
Yeah, exactly. Super polarizing.
Yeah, so yeah, we'll see how that one pays off for them. That's kind of one that time will tell us the story. You know,
I know. It's true.
But,
yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I don't really have too much else to add, at least on this particular topic. I think we have a lot of different things that came out of this that we could have potential conversations about a little bit more in depth that I would really like to do in the future. But do you have anything else that you can think of as far as like bearing the bike, niching down, anything like that you'd want to add before we close?
I mentioned this to you guys earlier, but like the initial episode that you guys did on this podcast was impactful for me, and was cool. I felt like it really personifies and incorporates this method that we're talking about, and like really gives a good illustration of what this concept like deployed and as it plays out in the market, what that looks like. Because you guys, I mean, we even started talking about it on this podcast. You know, you've got a history, a background that makes you unique coming in, running this marketing division of Mosaic, and growing in that. And then like the whole, even just you and Sienna's dynamic between like your background in M&A, built to sell, and her background in boutique, that's like the opposite of built to sell, and like how these things have weaved into each other, you know, is just like such a cool, that is a bear in the bike. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like you've got this couple that's like, this dude is like people focused, but he's selling businesses and buying businesses. That's like his thing, you know? And then like flowy, like design oriented boutique, artistic, you know, artistic. I love it. Yeah, so that's I feel like that's a great episode to kind of get a good illustration of you know, what the concept we're talking about.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's my carve out to go check that one out.
Yeah. We'll add a card in YouTube. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Cool. Well, awesome. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate your time, and I know we got a lot of value out of this conversation, and look forward to ones in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me in my office.
Thanks for stopping by.
Cool. All right.
Thanks for listening to Process Makes Purpose. We hope you gained valuable insights to transform your business journey. Stay tuned for more episodes with actionable strategies and inspiring stories by subscribing to our podcast and connecting with us on LinkedIn. See you next time.